Hello everyone. For my cross-cultural presentation, I'm going to be talking about death and dying rituals in the United States versus Japan and its relation to the aging process in developmental psychology. I chose this topic because it's something that I really don't know much about. It seems really interesting, and I wanted to learn about how other cultures outside of the US deal with the death of loved ones and how that relates to the aging process. So, just some background about the United States. Its population is 328.2 million. Its land size is 3.8 million square miles. Its economic state is a free market. The prominent religion is Christianity at 73.7% of the population. Its political structure is a federal republic, and the average household income is $63,000. And these statistics are from the CIA. Now for some background about Japan. Its population is 126.5 million. Its land size is 145,914 square miles. Its economic state is a free market like the US. Its prominent religion is Buddhism and Shinto. Its political structure is a constitutional monarchy. And the average household income is $38,000. And again, I got these statistics from the CIA. So now for a little introduction on the aging process. It's really important to consider how the aging process and other factors of aging tie into how different cultures handle death and dying. So as aging occurs, the body starts to degenerate. There's decreased organ efficiency, arthritis, decreased immune system function, hearing loss, etc. Men have higher mortality rates than women, and mortality is the number of deaths per 1,000 people per year. So, for example, Japan's mortality rate is 10.3 out of 1,000, and the United States mortality rate is 8.08 out of 1,000. It's also important to consider that higher income and education are correlated to better health, and I got these statistics from the CDC. As far as death rituals go in the United States, when someone's dying, it's common for them to have their loved ones close to them. And then once they pass, the family chooses if they're going to be buried in a cemetery somewhere or cremated. And the family would only choose if the individual that had passed hadn't specified what they wanted. There's usually an obituary sent out, and that's just a picture of the deceased and a little bit written about their life. And then there's a wake that happens before the funeral where people come to view the deceased and pay their respects to them. After the wake, a funeral occurs, and it's also common to recognize the deceased and their life. So close family and friends will attend, and people will wear all black. It's common for a priest to be present, and a funeral and burial can cost upwards of $10,000 in the United States. And that's just the cost for like the burial ground, headstone, casket, labor, etc. If the decision is made to have the passed one cremated, some families will choose to keep the ashes in an urn and either bury the urn somewhere meaningful to them. Some members of, like, say, the Navy will have their ashes spread at sea by the family members, or they'll just keep the urn in their house to remember them by. It's also very common for families to visit the gravesite of the buried one. And my information came from NCBI. So when it comes to death rituals in Japan, 91% of their funerals are conducted as Buddhist ceremonies. So right after death, the body's orifices are stuffed with cotton, and they'll place a knife by the body in order to keep out bad spirits. And then there's a wake, and then the cremation. So after the Buddhist ceremonies are done to the body, a wake will occur, and a Buddhist priest will chant from their religious text, and people will come up and offer incense as like a token to the deceased. Japan's modern grave sites store the ashes, and then some families choose to split them up and take them home separately. Cremation is part of the funeral, so the whole family attends and watches this happen, and it can take over an hour for the body to fully cremate. The families will wear all black to this, and then following the cremation, families will go in with chopsticks and pick out the leftover bone remains to place in an urn, just to keep as a momentum. In a Buddhist ceremony, the shrine is covered with a white paper to keep out impure spirits of the dead. And some families will choose to write all their family members' names on a headstone, and then the living family members' names will be written in red, and then the red is removed once someone dies. And this is just because it's cheaper to have everyone's names carved at the same time, because in Japan, the cremation rates are so high that there's really no burials of the body as a whole. So in Japan, funeral and burial sites can cost around $5,000. And then some graves have a barcode on them. So when you scan it with your phone, it tells you who else has scanned the barcode and visited the gravesite. And that just tells them, like, when their family has been there last. And my information came from World and I, Volume 13. When it comes to comparing and contrasting the US and Japan when it comes to dying and death rituals, one difference between them is that the cremation rates in Japan are far higher than the rates in the US. So they're nearly doubled in Japan. It's not common at all for them to have burials of the body. Prior to the wake, if there is one, the US doesn't traditionally prepare the body for afterlife as Japan does, because Japan has like a Buddhist priest present and they give the body a knife and other things to ward off evil spirits for the afterlife. Something else that's different is that Japan will put a headstone with all the family members' names on it that are living and write those in red, and the US doesn't do this. The US doesn't use like incense during wakes and rituals. Also, Japan will pick out bones to place in the urn with chopsticks, and the US does not do that. When it comes to similarities between the two, both cultures will have the family present, whether it be for cremation or the funeral. Both cultures have the entire family wear all black, so that's the proper attire. Another similarity is that both cultures will have a priest present, no matter what the religion, that heads the ceremonies. They both use headstones, and they both have a deep respect for the deceased. So these photos are just to give you a quick visual of what typical cemeteries look like in Japan on the top right, and then America on the bottom. And then in the top left, I have a to-scale photo of Japan in the US. So that's how much of the US Japan would take up. So that's just for everyone to look at to scale to see how small Japan really is in comparison. So why are they different? Why are we seeing these huge differences in burial preparation and ceremonies and stuff from these two different cultures? One of the reasons is that Japan is significantly smaller than the US. Their entire country is about the size of California, as you saw in the picture before, but their population is about 40% of the US. So their cremation rates are so high because they just don't have the land for burial like the US does. Another reason is religion. So Japan's prominent religion is Buddhism, while the US's is Christianity. And religion plays a huge part in how death rituals are conducted and what is believed about afterlife, etc. Another reason is economic factors. They play a huge part as well. And Japan's average household income is about half the US's. And we saw this in the first couple slides I had presented. So their funerals are cheaper, and besides not having land, it also saves them money to not have to have like a burial and pay for a big chunk of land for the body. Mortality is also affected by income. So, going back to my slide on the aging process, when we think about mortality, Japan has a lower average income than the US, so their mortality rate is higher, and those are linked. So they have more people that are dying and less money to give towards their death preparation. So, in conclusion, I learned a lot not only about Japan's culture around their death rituals, but also about their aging population and how they compare to the US. I would like to get to know more about their economy and how they function as a country and more about their globalization. But overall, it was really interesting to learn about everything that Japan has going on with their death rituals and whatnot versus the United States.